Hey Gecko fans, it's Wally from Supreme Gecko. I recently watched a video from Sostic Reptile on the best Crested Gecko enclosures. There's a lot of debate about this. I thought I have to do a video on this.
Today we're going to be talking about housing adult crested geckos, and I wanted to share with you one of the best housing options currently available on the market.
Hey, that is super important. He's pointing out that this is one of the best options out there. So join me as I cover all of the different options, the pros and the cons of this new Crested Gecko enclosure, and I share with you what I consider a better enclosure, and I share with you at the end the best Crested Gecko enclosure you can have. Now, before you throw me to the wolves in the comments down below, I'm a good friend with Sam at Sostic Reptiles, and we have been for many, many years. I contacted him before I did this video just to make sure he was okay with me doing a review of his video. Again, I think that there's two better options than the enclosure that Sostic Reptile covers in their video. I'll talk about those in just a moment. So let's go ahead and check out his video now.
You know, over the years I've tried so many different types of caging and housing for my crested geckos.
And I know that he has a ton of experience in this area. I have a ton too. I've been doing crested geckos for 22 years, so this will be a great review of crested gecko enclosures.
For most of my time keeping crested geckos, I've kept my adults in separated tubs on racking units.
If you know the Supreme Gecko channel, you know that last year and the year before, I've put together several of these types of enclosures simply because my old way of keeping crested geckos was a little bit old. It just wasn't working anymore. Here's a couple of examples of how we're keeping our crested geckos now in our facility, and this is exactly what Sostic Reptiles is pointing out that they've used in the past.
Some of the main cons that come to mind is, number one, it's very space inefficient to do this.
I certainly agree with that. This system does take up a little bit more space than I would like it to.
Number two, you got lids involved, which can be annoying.
What he's talking about here is those lids. You have to pull out the tub, you have to open the lid, you have to put the food in, do the cleaning, put water in, whatever you're doing, and then put the lid back and put the tub back on the rack. I completely agree, that's time consuming. Now I want to point out that while I feel that there are better ways to keep adult crested geckos, this method is very fiscally responsible. It is a very inexpensive way to do adult crested geckos. As an example, this rack of 10 enclosures that we've set up cost me about $225, $250 at the very most to set up.
Number three, and the one that seems to always be my problem, is I can never find the same type of tub.
I kind of agree with his concerns about finding similar tubs, but if you're purchasing tubs for one rack at a time, that's really not a concern.
A huge shout out to Mr. Robbie.
Hey, huge shout out to Robbie's Reptiles as well from Supreme Gecko on coming up with this concept. Robbie and I have talked a couple of times about this, and my concern has always been consistent, and it's going to be consistent in this video as well. We'll get to that in just a second.
Number one, they are very space efficient because they're stackable.
I can't agree more, although I think with tubs with lids, we're not that far off from these enclosures.
Number two, there's no lids involved.
No lids means saving a lot of time. Completely agree with that.
Number three, you can always find them, and you can find them online, meaning that you can get them shipped just about anywhere.
Good point. Although tubs with tops you can find anywhere. Take 10 minutes of research, you can find them very, very reasonable. And I'll have a link in just a second that I'll share with you.
And number four, I think they look a lot better than having tubs on racks.
Well, that's certainly your opinion. In all seriousness, I completely agree with his assessment that these new containers that he's going to show us do look better than tubs with tops. Okay, those were the pros, but there's a couple of cons coming up, and two of them are significant. Let's see what he has to say.
The only con that I can say is the price point. These are going to be a little bit more expensive than you're probably used to for regular tubs, which usually run, 10 to 20 bucks. The size we're going to be talking about today is $40.
Sam, a little bit more expensive, that's 4 times as much, $10 compared to $40. Now, that $30 difference might not mean that much if you have 2 or 3 or 4 Crested Gecko adults, But if you have 10 or 20 or 50 like we do, that's a big, big difference.
So here in front of you, you're seeing the drawers. These are from a company called Like It. You can find these on the website, the Container Store.
Okay, I'll admit it. These do look a lot better than tubs with lids. This again is from the Container Store, and it's a product called Like It. I'll share a link in the description of this video.
I've had a good portion of these come in broken, maybe like 25 to 40% of them come in broken or chipped or something. I just received 12 of these tubs, 4 of them were broken. They'd be like, yep, not a problem, we get it. And they send you out 4 new free ones that are hopefully not broken.
Okay, I've got to say, that's a pretty big concern to me. You order 10, they come in, 6 are good, 4 are broken. You send back a message to the company saying 4 are broken. You get 4 back in, 1 of them's broken. Big concern to me, at least. It sounds like Sam has done this a couple of times, so he's worked with the company. They're very responsive. They're replacing the broken ones. Super cool. But my gosh, if you have to order over and over again, that's a little bit of a concern to me.
The nice thing about them is that they're super space efficient.
I really can't disagree with that. They are super efficient in utilizing space. I don't think it's as much as Sam is saying here, but I think it does save some space with your adult crested geckos.
And so this size is 12.5 by 20.5 by 12. So if you just take those outside dimensions and you plug that into a gallons calculator, that comes out to be about 13.3 gallons.
So viewers, keep that in mind. 13 gallons. Remember that number, 13 gallons. Okay, I want to make a really quick note here. That size that he was showing in the video is for a smaller container at $32. The larger ones that he's talking about are actually $40.
A 64-quart tub is about 16 gallons.
So 16 gallons, that's a big difference. 16 compared to 13. In my mind, 3 gallons is a lot of space for an adult crested gecko.
And other than the price point, I think these are better than individual tubs in every single way. And once you get them, the price point isn't really going to bother you.
Well, that's like saying, I just bought this Maserati, and now that I've paid for it, it's really not that expensive. It's expensive when you're buying it. Okay, we talked about the breakage concerns. There's a 3-gallon difference between the tubs and these new containers, and price point from $10 to $40. That's a huge difference. So far we have 3 different cons here, but we're going to come up with a 4th in just a minute that he hasn't mentioned yet. So before we go on, let me know down below in a comment which one so far from an aesthetic standpoint looks the best to you. Either these new Container Store containers or tubs with the tops. Let me know in a comment down below.
And as you can see, I had big 6-inch holes in all the fronts of mine.
Now, I absolutely love what he's done with these containers with the holes for the ventilation and the screening in front. You're going to have to do ventilation holes in either solution that you're going for, but he has done a fantastic job with his.
The second thing I was concerned about, the drawers pull out very easy, so I was worried about a gecko maybe being able to jump against it and push it out. I've not had any issues with drawers sliding out on their own or anything like that.
And that's certainly a valid concern before you're purchasing a product like this, but looking at it right now, I can see that an adult crested gecko isn't going to push those drawers forward, but certainly a valid concern before you bring them in and try them out yourself. Okay, I'm going to jump to the chase right now. The big concern for me is price, and the second concern I have is exactly what Sam is going to mention next.
And the other thing is when the drawers are fully into the main compartment, I did have one minor issue. If you're sliding the drawer out, there is maybe an inch gap or less at the top between the top of the drawer and then the top of the compartment that it's in. And so if the gecko happens to be at the top near that time and you're in the action of you pulling it out, or it's not all the way back, they can get through that and get down into the compartment of the container.
Hey gecko fans, if you have crested geckos and you're pulling out the tub, the drawer, and the animal gets behind and under the pull-out drawer, that's a big concern. Now you're disassembling everything. You're trying to reach that animal. You're pulling out the drawer completely. The animal is out of the enclosure. I think that that's a pretty big concern, especially, and here's my bigger concern, if you're pulling it out and it's stuck in, I shouldn't say stuck, but it's in on top and it does get stuck while you're pulling it out, huge concern to me. Now, Sam did mention that he's only had that one time in I think 10 months that he's been using these containers, but still I think that that can happen more frequently depending on your usage.
And I can't recommend this enough.
So don't get me wrong, I think these enclosures are fantastic. My concerns again are them getting stuck behind the pullout and also the cost point. The cost point being $10 for a tub with a lid versus $40 a piece for these enclosures. And from a time-saving standpoint, I really don't think that tubs with tops really cost you that much additional time. Might take you another 3 or 4 minutes to work with 10 tubs over these containers. Now, from a space utilization standpoint, let me throw a wrinkle to this whole discussion. If you put together a stand just for the tubs without tops so they pull in and out of this rack like this that I'm showing right now, I think that you can save a ton of space. I can get 15 enclosures in about the same space that Sostic Reptiles is talking about with the container store containers. And it's still going to save you about half your cost. And you know what? I still haven't talked about the best Crested Gecko enclosure. What do you think it is? Leave a comment down below on what you think the best Crested Gecko enclosure is. If you've been on social media lately, you know that there's a heated discussion about rack systems versus natural enclosures. The very best enclosure that you can have for crested geckos is, of course, a bioactive enclosure set up for your crested geckos. These plastic storage containers certainly have their place in the crested gecko world, and I'm all for using them. But if you're doing a setup just for a few animals, the best way that you can go is a bioactive enclosure like this. Hey, we do a lot of videos on crested gecko care and husbandry. You can find a list right here. Make sure that you watch the list for any questions that you might have. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if you like this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next video.